Welcome to season 5 of Own Your Divine Light show. I am your host, Yarra Atlantica Miller, also known as Janet Miller. And the theme of this show is the divine human rising, recovering our sacred truth. And this show is an exploration of the secret truths that have been concealed from us. We are letting go of the old system that no longer works and has held us back from becoming the divine humans we are meant to be. Today, we are having that dynamic way shower, Sherri Divband, as our special guest, who'll be sharing her divine truth with us, and so that together we can achieve the divine human rising. Welcome to the show, Sherri.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. This is such a pleasure for me.
Thank you too. I'm just so thrilled to have you here. And let me tell you a little more about Sherri. Sherri is an intuitive and transformational energy healer and a founder of Aramis Creative Learning Center and the Aramis Collective. She is the author of Intuitive, Transformational, and Evolutionary Divinely Guided Books and the Divinely Guided Children's Books and Animation Series. Sherri has focused her healing practice on guiding and representing New Earth children to acclimate to this planet, to the energy fields, as well as guiding and coaching their parents on how to raise these spirited children. The Aramis Creative Learning Center was launched in 2020 and as a holistic and alternative education platform where children come first. And Sherri, that is like the best thing I had ever heard when I heard you first on Michael Jaco's show. That was the first time I heard you, and you talked about this. I was like, oh my gosh, yay! Someone has stepped up and done this, and started to create this for the kids because so needed right now. And you just, I know it was a different kind of a mantle that you weren't expecting in your life. You took it on. And you said, okay, I didn't think this was going to be my choice, but it's my choice because I know there's lots of reasons that this came through for you. So can you tell us a little bit how this all started? How did you get this idea to create this school, and where did you wake up? Like, how did your awakening start?
That's a really long story. The school itself, I mean, there's so many elements to it.
You can tell me whatever part you want. Yeah.
Well, we'll start towards the end and work our way. We'll start at the present. The idea from the school, like you mentioned, I never imagined myself doing this. It wasn't something that I really ever dreamed about, to be honest. It came, and I guess that's the beauty of it. It was very organically brought together and in divine timing. And I think, I believe that whether it's our spirit guides, our angels, and our higher self all working together, I believe that our organic self, our higher self, and our guides, we decide ahead of time what we believe we can handle at any given time throughout our life. Because sometimes if we know it all ahead of time, we might react in a certain way and we're not ready for it. And I know that if I had been told what I'd be doing now 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, even just a short year or so before I started, I would have panicked and I would have been like, no, because that part of ourselves that we doubt, our capabilities would have come through. And I would have said, oh, I can't do that. Who am I to take something like that on? So I believe that the organic manner of which my journey has followed through is what makes it so interesting. Because my daughter, I have 3 children, and my daughter came to me about a year or so. It's really hard right now to remember time because time is actually changing. So it's really hard to remember that, but it was roughly about a year before. So I had 2 children. I was working at the zoo because I'm also a registered veterinary technician. I dedicated 20 years of my life to working with animals, and I'll get into why and how that happened. But my daughter came to me in a period of time where I was very awake, very spiritual, and kind of in search of something. What I was in search of, in hindsight, looking back, I don't know what that was. I just knew that I was searching for more. I wasn't happy with what I was doing career-wise anymore. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. And if anything, I was feeling conflicted working at a zoo because I really, in my heart of hearts, didn't believe that we should have these animals in the zoo setting. So it was a real conflict for me. I was really struggling. And so I started to kind of recluse a little bit and really tried to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. And so that, I think, was the catalyst for my daughter, and also the timing for her to come through spiritually. She came to me in a meditation and she introduced herself, said that she would be coming into my life as my daughter, and that we had a really big mission together. And she needed my help and also my consent, and asked me if she could come through. And of course, I was elated. I always wanted 3 children. I knew it, I knew intuitively I would have 3. I just didn't know the timing. And at that point, I had 2. And to be honest, I wasn't quite ready for the 3rd at that time. So it kind of came out of nowhere, but I knew she was coming at some point. And so it was a beautiful introduction, and she had such an angelic energy, is the best way I could describe. Beautiful, angelic, warm, loving, kind energy. And she became my greatest teacher. And we would communicate for roughly that entire year before I even got pregnant. And because she was explaining to me, she taught me more than anybody has ever taught me, or any book that I've ever read, about New Earth children, their role, the different types of children, their characteristics that they have, the challenges that they have. And I would channel her in the sense that I would communicate telepathically. I didn't allow her to take over my vessel like that, but we would communicate telepathically, and I would write down the messages that would come through as my thoughts, and I would write down everything that she would say to me. And I had a journal, and she taught me so much about how the earth was changing and how how important the children are. And we brought in Dolores Cannon, which ironically and synchronistically, my mother was learning QHHT while I was learning, and so it's so many synchronicities when I look back. I'm like, man, there's so many things that we can pull together. But she taught me about the New Earth children, and it was a beautiful merging of energy, and it really was probably the height of my awakening. I didn't know what we were going to do together. She never actually said exactly what we were going to do, just that it was a larger mission, and she needed my help, and it would be life-changing, and it was important for the world. And, those kind of macro kind of information, but not the details. But at the time, I was so elated. I didn't even care. I was with blind faith. I was like, I'll do anything you want, because I was so excited for her to come.
Yeah.
And then I got pregnant with her in the physical sense. And so every week, I think it was, I got a message from her, and I wrote that down in the journal, and it was continued information, of more of what she was explaining to me before. But it came really apparent to me, I think, during that period, that I thought to myself, this is information that I'm going to use later. This is not just for me. It's not just little secrets and tidbits that she was giving to me. It was information that I was going to use later, not only for my books, but what I'm doing now, which I had no idea, and I would be sharing it with the world. And so I became really excited about it. So fast forward to when she was born, what I thought we were going to do together, what the idea that came forward for me was that I would open up a spiritual center for children in my area. Just the one, nothing, just like a nice Sunday school for children, but spiritual. So no religious component to it. I had this grand idea that I would open up a spiritual center, and the parents could come through, and the children can come through, and the children would learn a lot of what I was teaching at that time to the adults, how to, Reiki, energy healing, working with crystals, working with pendulums, a bunch of metaphysical type of classes, tarot cards, how to connect with your intuition, communicate with your guides, animal communication. I taught so many different things. And I thought, wow, this would be really cool for children. We should expose the children to this, because at that time I noticed that my children were pretty open, the 2 that I had previously. And my son was seeing angels and communicating with Archangel Michael, and he was so into what I was doing. He had his own collection of crystals, and he would pull his own tarot card out of the spirit animal deck that we had. And he was so excited about it. And I thought, wow, this is cool. I wonder if other kids are into this. And as I was working with other parents, they seemed very interested in their children learning as well. So that's kind of how the formula started. I was going to open a beautiful spiritual center for children. And it turned into so much more when the pandemic came through and everybody's life changed. The children were home, and I was much more present and active, playing more of an active role in my children's education and overhearing kind of what they were learning and the struggles that they were going through. 3 very different struggles for 3 very different personality types. I had 1 in high school and 2 in elementary school. And I was just shocked at what these children were going through. And I think it served as another catalyst and another layer for, wow, we need to do more for these children. I started going out and speaking publicly on platforms like Michael Jaco's show, like we mentioned, and many other platforms. And what I noticed is that there was a massive need for a change. And many of the parents were seeing what I was seeing. And when they heard me talk about my idea of the spiritual center that I had gone speaking about publicly, they said, a lot of people would ask me with tears in the saying, I'm crying to you as I'm writing this email. Thank you so much for what you're doing. Are you going to, number one, will you have one in my area? I'm in California, I'm in Canada, I'm in France, all over the world. And then number 2, will you ever do anything academic? Because I'm tired of the system here. I want to take my children out. We need something better for them. Will you help me? And I was overwhelmed, Janet, with all of the people that were reaching out to me. Suddenly everyone was contacting me for help. And I really had to have one of those kind of, sit downs with myself. And I thought, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? Is this the level of which I'm supposed to bring this? It's not a spiritual center. Am I taking on, not taking on, but am I supposed to create a platform of education that's different and alternative for these starseeds that my daughter taught me about? And it all started to kind of click together for me. And it all came together in such a beautiful way. And so my divinely guided children, I always use the word divinely guided. It's something that came through for me a lot when I was working in sessions with adults way before even children. And one of my books is called Divinely Guided. And that was a book for teens and adults, parents. And
one of them.
that is the children's version. There's a book that is for adults and
I think I have that too, but I brought these 2 along too.
Yeah, those are the children's books.
They're beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. But I wanted to kind of give like a guidebook to parents on how to raise starseeds, and a lot of the information that came through from my daughter Aramis is in that book. And so I thought, I'll name the spiritual center Divinely Guided Children. That's kind of where I came up with at the end. I added children at the end, and that's what I did for about the first year. We offered virtual classes because I tried the in-person thing, and because of the pandemic and these things, and there was a lot of resistance in my area for the children to be together, and I wasn't okay with them wearing those. Sure. And if anything, I told them they didn't have to, and I didn't encourage it. If anything, I discouraged it. Right. And I think it upset them. I took other precautions, but parents were not okay with that. I lived in a very strict area, let's just say that. And so the in-person thing didn't work out. And so we just decided to go virtual, and it grew. And you know what? I think it needed to happen that way because I was able to help more children that way, because children from all over the world were logging on for these Reiki classes, animal communication classes, etc. And parents were elated and so happy about it. The children were having such a good time. And I think about a year into it, I had another epiphany one day, and I was sitting there and I felt like I had this overwhelming urge. I don't really want to use the name Divinely Guided anymore. I felt like it had played its role. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, what can I name these centers that are turning into something bigger than a metaphysical center? It needed another name for it, right? Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there thinking about it. And I swear, Janet, I had this explosion of an epiphany all at once. It was so powerful. And I heard all of this information. It was a download. Everything came all at once. And what I realized in that moment, and I don't think I've ever shared this version of a story before quite like this, I realized this is the legacy that my daughter was bringing through. This is what she wanted to help with. And the reason I chose to name it after her is because I realized that knowing her at that point, which she was about, I'm trying to think, maybe roughly 5, I had noticed that when I put her in pre-education, whatever you call that, there's different names for it. She loved being a teacher. And she told us from a young age, about 3 years old, Mom, I want to be a teacher when I grow up. She was almost an obsession about being a teacher, and pretended to be a teacher. She would come home from school and act out what the teacher did, lesson plans. She would teach to her class in her room of her friends. And I realized all in that moment, oh my gosh, she's training for something later. This is her legacy. She wants to be a teacher. This is her, this, I am creating something for her to take over. And that's why she needed my help. And so I changed the name to Aramis Creative Learning Center. And that's kind of where everything just took a large, massive turn into more of an alternative education platform. And years later, now we have, 8 or 9 children's books. We have 17 cartoon animation episodes, and we're just growing and growing and growing. And that's kind of where we are right now. And the inspiration behind it was truly my children, but specifically my daughter brought this journey into my life, and I wasn't expecting it at all.
Yeah, but so how do you feel about it now?
Well, I can't imagine doing anything else because I'm
Right.
so passionate about what I'm doing. And now I truly understand the whys, the needs. And now that I work more with Starseed children, and I talk to them every single day, they're telling me what they want and what their struggles are and how misjudged they are. And the labels that they're given, and the things that are designed in our environment to lower their vibration so that disconnects their intuition, and they're more easily programmed. And I learned so much in the last years, but the bulk of it is interesting. The bulk of it is actually from the children themselves when I do sessions with them. And I couldn't possibly have learned half of this in a book or from somebody else. I've learned it directly from the children themselves, which I think is so beautiful and authentic, which helps a lot. But it motivates me because it's not just about my daughter Aramis and creating a better world for her. How selfish would that be? It's about helping all the Starseeds. Why else? I mean, why else would they have come to me with this mission? Because they knew I was here to do that even before I had figured it out yet. And so they were kind of just waiting for me to awaken to the possibilities of what I was here to do when I was ready for it. I had to be ready.
Yeah, I mean, that's incredible. How did you come up with the name Aramis?
So that's an interesting story. So Aramis came to me as her name was Lila. I'm sorry, Layla. Layla, when she first introduced herself as Layla. And the reason she took on that name was because it's a name that we have had together in another incarnation that we knew each other, so it would be familiar to me. So that is one of her names. But what happened was my husband, who's also very intuitive and sometimes doesn't trust his intuition, he had a dream that she came to him and told him, my name is Aramis. And he woke up and he told me one day, and this was like 6 months into the pregnancy, we had already chosen the name Zara because I wanted to choose a powerful name. And there was a lot of reasons we chose that name. That was going to be her name. And he said, Sherri, we got to change the name. She needs to have this name. I said, well, what name? And he told me Aramis. And normally I'm more combative and stubborn. Once I make my mind, you can't change it. But I had to admit, I absolutely love the name. And I said, I love that name. Where did it come from? And he said, she came to me in my dream and she told me. And at first I was kind of like, excuse me, I've been communicating with this soul for over a year now, right? Why did she go to him and not me? And so there was a part of me that, like, ego side, that was kind of hurt. Right? Like, why did you? But it's okay because it had to be this way because he needed to be a part of everything. And through the discovery afterwards of me asking her where that name came from and where is it from, she told me that was the name of her oversoul group, which was Aramis, and there were many Aramises, and they were coming here to the planet to help change the trajectory of the future in many different ways, not just education. And come to find out, years later, I found out that she's part of the Artemis group, that they're taking. It's actually Artemis, that they're taking over the energy, not taking over. That's not the right word. They are embodying the energy of Artemis, the goddess Artemis, but they are changing the name to Aramis to give it more of a modern energy. And because it's more than just Artemis, it's a lot more than that. And so it's the evolution of Artemis, which is Aramis. And so there's so many factors to it, but actually I have to give credit to my husband because she came to him to tell him the name. And the reason for that, another layer of reasonings for that, is that the two of them are connected on a soul level more than her and I actually are. And so it had to be that way because she needed to let him know she was coming. So there's a lot of information there.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful that she did, dads are always like sort of on the outside looking in when moms are pregnant, although they're always participating, but that she connected to her dad. And of course, you said she had that beautiful life, other lives with him that she didn't have with you. But what a
Exactly.
beautiful name. I do love that name myself. It's just so pretty and flowy, and it does feel very modern. I mean, it just has so much light to it. It just feels like a light-filled name, It's incredible. So yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful name. So, I mean, that's an incredible story that, you're even your husband was open to this information, which makes it so much nicer that the whole family were part of it. Your children were, your older kids were, your husband was, and how perfect is that? I mean, it doesn't always happen that way. So you had a lot of good things that way happening.
Sure. Yeah, I think it was just part of our journey. I mean, it wasn't perfect. There were definitely bumps in the road and roadblocks even, and there were some very difficult times within that. But overall, I think we're quite lucky because we kind of came in with this knowing and understanding, and we all follow our intuition, and I think that helps, significantly.
Yeah, yeah. So you're doing some new things for your school. I know that I was listening to you and you talk, and then you just mentioned it before when we came up, before we came on, that you're doing a whole new series of class on, what is it called? 5D birthing? Is that what you
Uh,
said?
but no, I just did an interview. One of my passion projects, Jen, and I think it's because I believe a lot of us incarnated right now, not only are galactic, but we are bringing forward the philosophies of Lemuria and Atlantis and also Inner Earth, Telos. And so my Lemurian version of myself has come through a lot in this lifetime because I was the midwife, and so I'm very passionate
Ah,
about not only divine feminine and children, but also women bringing in their children, their young, and the whole process, the whole birth process, the whole conception process, and everything. And so that is a passion project of mine. And I did hypnobirthing for a while, and I coached probably hundreds of couples over those years to have a more peaceful, calm birth. And I didn't have the epiphany until after that it was the midwife version of me from Lemuria helping my modern version of me to help women overcome the birth traumas that we've endured over the last hundreds of years, for a very specific reason, and we are moving out of that energy. And I think that it's important as we move forward because everything is changing. Our gestation periods are going to change. We are going to have more conscious conceptions, soul merging, integration of the being that's coming through, where the mother and father are going to know ahead of time that they're coming. They're going to call them in, and it's a known agreement between the three or more multiples if there are, and a lot. So the trajectory of conception and birth itself is going to change dramatically, and I think that I want to bring awareness to that as well, because it's these star seeds that want this information to come out so that we do change the process of how the pregnancy and how the women are, and how they're treated, their health and everything, and their and the birth practices, so that they come out in more of a peaceful environment. Because I don't think we realize, many people probably do, but for majority I don't think realize how much these beings are affected during the conception and throughout the gestation process. And there's a lot of trauma that people have had because of their gestation and their development as a fetus in the womb, that's causing issue now in their life. And so we're trying to clear all of that so that the star seeds can come through in a much more calm, peaceful state and birth in a much more calm, peaceful way, so that their introduction to this planet from the beginning is peaceful, and so it's kind of healing those wounds from the start. So I'm bringing forward that information. And so I did an interview recently with a beautiful woman, Alicia Brochet, and we talked about that. And so that's what we were talking about before. But it's information that needs to come out because I think it's really, truly relevant to the starseeds coming in. And this is what they're asking for.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they want to come in with a less traumatic birth. I mean, that would make sense because it's not an easy place to come into to start. And now they want to just come in with a softer entrance rather than
Yeah.
where they've been. And yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, you're going in so many different directions, but you're doing it in such a natural flow, like you'd started the school, and the children teaching you what you meant to bring through is so wonderful to hear. And I know you connect with the star children, like they will, like some of the kids that we have labels on, you can communicate with them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how that has been working? That's how you kind of have gotten more information about what they need.
Yeah, one of my passions is to be part of the breakdown of the labeling of children, because I think innately many of us know that it's wrong and have known that for quite some time, but we didn't know what we were fighting against. We didn't know why or how. We just knew that the labels were kind of nefarious, if you want to say that. And so it was, but this is again something that I wasn't in search of. It wasn't something that Aramis actually brought to me. It was something that I learned through my sessions with children. When I started working with children, for some reason, which now I know why, but at the time, for some reason, I was thinking I was attracting a lot of parents and grandparents that are bringing their children to me that were diagnosed with either ADHD, autism, dyslexia, and other labels, spectrum. And some of them in the beginning were nonverbal. And so I really couldn't communicate with them, and their families couldn't communicate with them. And they really wanted messages, what can I do? What's going on? How can I help? And then there are those that were fed up with the school system and being told that they needed to be medicated. So they were coming to me to see if what we could find out about it before they medicated them. And then there were those that came to me at their wits' end. They did everything and they've medicated their child. They lost their child in the respect of they became a shell of themselves, and they wanted me to help get them back. So there were many layers to it. And I was kind of thinking, am I even qualified for this? Like, I feel more of like a therapist. Like at first I was kind of taken back by all of these children, these beings that were trusting me. But what it was that I found out when I was communicating with their higher self was that every single problem that they had, or ailment or issue, all had an energetic explanation for it. And I started to recognize and put together, the more I spoke with, that the ADHD category, for example, all had similar characteristics that could be explained, and same as the others. And so I started to put this research together, and I thought to myself, wow, this really needs to get out there, because I believe that let's say the dark ones, whatever you want to call it, the negative agenda knew and has known that these children are coming through these star seeds that are exceptional, that are wise, high vibrational, out of the box thinkers, rebels, but all for a reason, to help us break down these paradigms and assist us in our evolution out of the programming. So they knew that, so they're labeling these problem children, or these children with behavioral issues, so that they can separate them from the other children and then medicate them to suppress their light, and so that they can be controlled. That was their plan, I believe. And that's what they've been doing actually successfully for a while now, because many parents didn't know any better. They just believe, most of us are programmed to believe that the doctors know everything. And as good parents, we follow what we're told. Otherwise, we're neglectful and that sort of thing.
Right.
So I think the first most profound experience I had was a nonverbal autistic boy that came to me. The mother came to me, and what he told me, I said, why won't you speak? And he said, because we are here to teach humanity how to connect energetically and telepathically. So because your language on your planet not only has negative energy behind it, essentially curses, because the words that we say have a lot of meaning and energy behind it. And we don't realize that a lot of the words that we say are feeding into the negative agenda and lowering our vibration. We don't know that. Many people don't. So we're innocently saying these words like school, which is just loosh, and other things that these children, number one, are refusing to say outright, because they know they're negative and they don't want to summon up dark energy. So they're just flat out refusing to speak our language, but also that they're here to encourage us to remember and retrain ourselves to speak to each other through energy, through our heart space, and through telepathically. And they're training us to do that, starting with the parents and starting with the teachers, and then it ripples out into humanity. And the crazy thing is, most of the parents that have had a nonverbal child for a little bit of time all were able to communicate with them just fine. They were getting along just fine. They didn't come to me because they were not able to communicate. They just wanted more information, or am I doing it right? Or is my child happy? You know, but they were able to communicate. So they were learning. And that for me, I thought, wow, what a powerful explanation. That makes a lot of sense to me. You know, another time I was told, I asked, why don't you look people in the eye? You know, because a lot of these children won't look people in the eye. And he said, the most, probably even more profound than the other, was he said, well, I can see their demons. It's like, really took me back. I got goosebumps, I got shivers, and I was, because what he, further explanation with that, what he was saying is that they see multidimensionally. So they can see all of our hitchhikers, or all the energy, not only our auric field, but the energies attached to us, the entities, the demons, etc. So sometimes, and even beyond that, they can see beyond our thoughts. They can tell if we're lying. They can tell our intention. Imagine how overwhelming that is for a child to look at an adult with all of that baggage, good, bad, and different, and process it in the moment in a mind of a child, even though they're a wise, ascended being. They're still in a child's mind trying to process. And it can be overwhelming and outright scary. And sometimes when they see ghosts and entities, they are literally afraid of the people or the energy that they're surrounded with. Doesn't mean they're all bad, but it's still chaotic and overwhelming. And I thought, oh my God, that makes so much sense to me. So it was these profound, that's just two examples of so many that I could give you. But the point is that they were huge. It was huge and eye-opening for me, that the more and more these children I spoke with that were giving me more, validating more of what I was being told and adding on to it, I realized that they're falsely labeled. Now, there is a nefarious agenda, and I talk about this a lot, and I've done many interviews where I literally go through, you know, there's countless things that they do to lower the vibration, so that sometimes there could be something wrong neurologically and behaviorally as a result of negative influence. So that is a thing. But there's also a whole other beautiful explanation of these 5D and above multidimensional starseeds coming through and helping us grow, shift, and change. And they're trying to help us, but our humanity, the way it stands and has been, due to manipulation and programming, has encouraged us that it's bad and there's something wrong with them and they need to be fixed. And so that's another part of my journey, is to speak out publicly, not with the intention of fighting anybody. I don't ever want to fight anybody. What my intention and role is, I believe, is to get the awareness of the parents that are listening and saying, gosh, that makes a lot of sense. I knew that I didn't align with what that doctor was saying. What she's saying makes a lot of sense, and open their own mind so that they can make their own decision. And if we do this on a mass scale, then we as a collective can shift the energy because we're informed. So it's not that I want to go out and say and debate the scientists and the doctors. I'm not interested in any of that. In fact, I just want to help parents see an alternative reason. And 99.9% of the time, it resonates with the mom and dad or the grandparent. And they're like, oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense to me. Thank you. And then they see improvements in their child almost immediately when they make certain changes. But some things aren't meant to change. They're meant to be the way they are, to encourage their parents to change or to heal or to think differently. So that is a huge passion of mine as well.
I mean, the way you're delving into these things, you really are coming up with the most amazing results that, just as you say, are helping people in such amazing ways. Because I remember, you know, I had a child who was not willing to sit still in school, and he was actually helping the teacher because he didn't want to sit. Started in Montessori school, and both of mine did, and then went on to, you know, public, because I felt like, well, they didn't have enough of those schools close by that I could continue on through higher education. So I went into the public realm, and it was such a shift from Montessori to that. I mean, these are really well done Montessori schools. There's all kinds of different versions of those too, but this was a very good one. And so when my son went to school, the first thing he said was, why are the teachers yelling at us? Like, the teachers talk so loud. And all the teachers in the Montessori would whisper. They would whisper at them so they could get their attention. They talked in whispers, and the kids would just have to lean in to hear more. And so that really caught them to be focused on what the teachers were saying. And so it was such a switch for him to go to that school because it was so different. And so the teachers didn't know what to do with him because he was sort of all over the place, wanting to do things and wanting to help them. And so finally it turned out that he was just a kid who was just smart. He just knew things, and he needed to be in the next level program. So, and both of them did. But, my daughter was so different. And the other one was just a guy who needed, attention. But he was first going to be labeled the bad guy until they found out, oh, well, guess what? He's kind of smart. So he needs help in a different way. So you're doing this with the Star Children in such a magnificent way where they're coming out and you're getting their information through them to help shift our thinking about all these ways we've been shown, like you just mentioned. And it's a powerful understanding. It's a powerful understanding you're bringing through. So I know, what else? I love that about, how you connected with those children. So you also are working with the parents so much. The parents have really, some of them are so gifted in their own right. They're very high star beings in their own right. And I've seen, light language coming through, and a mother brought in all these drawings that she was doing to help children. I mean, it's been incredible to watch the parents. So how did you find out about the parents? How did they decide to come forward for you?
Parents is interesting. So if I rewind back to as an animal nurse, I worked as an animal nurse that was my passion. I was that girl that was going to dedicate her whole life to animals. And it was all I cared about truly was animals. I wasn't really thinking about children until I had my own. I'll admit that. So I always wanted to be a mom, but I really was focused on animals. And so I learned animal communication and healing, energetic healing for animals. And so because I wanted to do more for the animals, because I worked in the ICU for quite some time, and it was one of the hardest periods, but also my favorite, because I truly enjoyed the medicine aspect of it. And I felt like I was really helping the animals, especially when they would come in, almost dying, and then they would leave completely healed. And it was so rewarding, and I loved it. But I wanted to learn more of the healing, energy healing aspect of that. And so as a result of that, and I did doing more animal communication, I started working with people more. And that's kind of how I went from animals to people. Is when I did animal healing and animal communication as a side business, I noticed probably like 99% of the time, that might be an exaggeration, but majority of the time, when the owners or the caretakers of the animals would contact me because their animal had a behavioral issue or a health issue, one or the two generally, it was always as a result of them either taking on too much of their owner, or they were mirroring their owner's behavior. So the root cause of all of it, majority of the time, was the owner themselves. So I always had to say the same thing. Listen, I think your animal's taking too much on for you. You're the one that, and I would say it's very respectfully and politely, but you're the one that needs to kind of reevaluate this and that, And many were receptive, but many weren't. And I got tired of just saying the same thing over and over. And I think the animals were there to teach me that, yes, you love us, but we're doing a lot to help people. And maybe you could help them too with your energy healing, because they need it more than we do, truly. So I said, okay, I'll be open to that. And I started working with people more than animals. And I kind of put the animals aside, and I started working with people more and more, and information was coming through. And I think just naturally I started attracting more parents just throughout that period. And also when I would do hypnobirthing, people would love, everybody has their way of doing something, right? No matter if you do Reiki or if you're a hypnobirthing practitioner or whatever it is, everyone always has their own style, or most people do anyway. So they, just because there were a lot of hypnobirthing practitioners, for some reason, many people just not gravitated towards my methods, my style, my take on it, because I would always add other things to it. And so they would want to keep working with me later. And so then I would undoubtedly become kind of friends with the family. And then I would see the child grow up after not grow up, but I would
Oh,
see the
sure.
baby get bigger, and then I would see the mom and the dad and then the baby. So it kind of naturally gravitated from animals to adults to more families and parents and children. So there's this nice, like we talked about, it's this organic thing that just kind of happened naturally. I didn't
Mhm.
ask for it. I didn't know it was coming truly, but it just always seems to naturally gravitate towards whatever's happening next. And so that's kind of where I was introduced to the children, was through the parents, which was from the adults, which was from the animals. And so it kind of naturally led to that.
Wow, that's incredible. So your own gifts, you have your own gifts. Now, how did those come through for you?
Well, I believe that I've always been very intuitive as a young girl. I've always felt different and never
Mm,
felt like I fit in anywhere. I
I
was
know the
always
feeling.
wanting, yeah, it's a very common feeling, I think. And I always wanted to be with the adults. I always wanted to be older than I was. It's like I would, finish one grade and I was like, I can't wait till I get to the next. And it was always like I could never achieve. I could honestly never get to that age that I felt somehow that I needed to be. And what's funny is, look, in hindsight, I look back, it wasn't until I became a mother that I felt content with who I was and where I was. I never, at that point is when I felt like I was stopped reaching for more. I was
Mhm.
content at that point. I guess I somehow on some subconscious level knew I needed to be a mom. And so I wasn't happy until I got there. And so I was always hanging out with the adults. I was always asking the adults questions. And I always seemed to bring conversations out in people that were deep. And so that either turned people off completely, or they thought I was weird, or some were open to it. But I just was different. I was an awkward kid. I also got made fun of a lot because we moved around. So I never was in the same place more
Yes.
than a
Yes.
short period of time. So I also, kids can be mean.
Yep.
And so I was always the new kid. So they would, I was an easy target. I was picked on. I wasn't part of their group or their club. And I even had kids tell me, you can't be my friend because, you're new. I mean, I actually heard that many times.
Wow.
And so I eventually, sadly, I got used to it. And, that's part of why I turned to animals, because of
Mm,
that experience. So again, whether or not I asked for that when I came in, or the universe provided an experience that I needed to be a catalyst for my journey, everything happens for a reason. So I don't try to cry about it now and say, "Oh, woe is me."
oh,
It's just my
no,
journey,
no.
right?
Yep.
That's those are the things that happened to me. But um, I always was intuitive. I always seemed to see the dark energy around, and I would get afraid, and witches for some reason always stood out to me. Like I would be outside in the playground with the kids at school, and I would look out into the woods, and I just knew, and I would say to myself, there are witches out there. I look back now and I'm like, that's so weird or random, but I would
What did
just
you
say to
think of
myself,
it?
don't go over there. Like I would be like, don't go over there, Sherri. I would be afraid. It was almost like I was being watched and I knew it, but I never had anyone to talk to about it. You didn't hear the other kids
Mm,
saying that. So like I just was like, I'm gonna keep it to myself. Um, but I don't think I truly embraced who I was or my gifts because I never felt comfortable in who I was. So I just blocked it, which I think a lot of people do. But
yep.
it wasn't until I had my first child at 23 that the floodgates opened up and everything changed for me. And then for me, my catalyst, because everybody has something, whether it's a life-threatening, illness or a near-death experience or some trauma or something beautiful like childbirth or whatever it is, everybody has something. For me, it's every single child brought more gifts and opened me up more. So at 23 and then around 30 and then 32, something like that, that's when everything just, I feel like I got upgraded, upgraded, upgraded.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was kind of it wasn't one big thing. It was just different periods of my life that opened up doors for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's beautiful because motherhood is it is a very grounding experience. You really have to be so present with motherhood, and that no one teaches you what it is until you're in it. No one taught
Yeah.
me. I don't know about you. Did you have any teachers?
I mean, my mom was beautiful. She was a
Was
teen
it-
mom. She had me at 15 years old, and that's a whole other story. And there were, there was trial and tribulation with all of that, and she did her best. But she tried her best to help me. But I think it's one of those things as a mother, you want to figure it out for yourself because there were a lot of things that my mom did that I didn't like, and I promised myself I would never do. So it was kind of like me just figuring it out as I went. So I didn't really have, and I was the first of all of my friends to have children by like 6 years. So I
Mhm.
really truly didn't have much guidance where that's concerned. And I think that was probably planned because I needed to be open to authentically having an experience without too much bombardment of other people that
Yeah.
were seniors of me to tell me what to do,
Mhm. Mhm.
you know?
Interesting. It's so interesting. So, what do you see happening now? Where do you see everything going with the world right now, with your school? How's everything connecting for you?
Well, I think everything is happening and connecting on a very grand scale, which is absolutely beautiful. Um, I believe where we're headed is, whatever you want to call it, the Great Awakening, the Ascension, our evolution, whatever we call it. I think there's just a lot of words that mean the same thing. And sometimes those words tend to trigger people. So if we just take the words out and we just simply say that we are transmuting, transforming, and evolving to embody more of our sovereign self. And I think our children are helping us to do that. I think children come in and have a way of healing so that the next generation heals a little bit more and more. But we're on a massive healing trajectory right now. And so many people are really just healing generational traumas
Mhm.
and healing the bloodlines. And there's so much, and it's multidimensional too. It's not just that, it's the soul lineage. Because a lot of us come in with soul groups. And so there's this massive healing going on. Paradigms are breaking down. The systems are breaking down, the 3D matrix, whatever you want to call it. And we're going through this 4D period of healing and transformation and self-discovery and forgiveness and all these beautiful things that are also really challenging and can be really difficult as well. But just discovering, like, who is Sherri? If you unravel all the layers of programming and trauma that I've endured, at the end of the day, who am I really? I have to figure that out. No one can tell me. And same with you and same with everyone else. And I think that we all have catalysts that facilitate that healing that we're all having right now at the same time. And that's where we are right now, and where we're headed, I believe, is this beautiful energy of infinite possibilities, truly. And so for me, I'm focusing on the education, but I know, because I've seen it through my sessions, getting like a peek in the window of the future of this particular person and that particular person. I've seen a lot, and I see the world transforming into a lot of different things where the collapse of the pharmaceutical and the medical industry into something more humble and
Yay.
more healing and connecting to the earth, and more indigenous, and that whole platform changing completely. How we care for our elders, the quantum military, which I've talked about, is a whole new way of protecting the earth as global citizens as opposed to separated by borders. I see all of that, the political system crumbling and something new evolving, more like the Lemurian principles, for example, not just that exclusively, but councils with elders that are not based on age, but based on consciousness. So I've seen children as young as 7 on a council with somebody that's like 500 years old. So it really has to do with your consciousness, not your age in the body that you're embodying at that moment. And for children, I think that slowly, and I don't want to start a fight, so I'm not trying to take over the education system, the public one, but I
Right.
believe over time that's going to happen on
Oh,
its own
yeah.
in its evolution. And so it's not me doing it, but I think that's where we're headed. And I think perhaps what I'm here to work on and start for my daughter is to create that alternative option so that it grows bigger and bigger for those that want it. And then eventually I believe that it's going to be the main educational platform, which is self-directed learning. It's very organic, so it's ever evolving and changing, which I like. That not many people do. They're
I
not
love
creatures
that.
of change, like they're creatures of habit. And I like the idea of change, so as each community might do something a little bit different. Whatever works for that community, that demographic, that area of the world is what should be focused upon and what the children are learning. And no grades, no more testing, no more memorization, no more programming. It's connecting to the earth, teaching children that they are sovereign and what that means, and that they do have other lives, other versions of themselves, but how can they be present in the moment in the life that they are currently living, but how can they also tap into those other versions of themselves and connect to their intuition and their higher self, and just transitioning the entire way that we treat, how we encourage, and how we guide our children moving forward. And it starts with changing the language, changing the style, basically changing everything. And I believe that what I've created so far in Aramis is my version of that. Is it the right way and the only way? Absolutely not. But it's just one that I believe is a possibility. And let's see where it goes. I don't know, but I think that it's the point is that it's evolving. So nothing is stringent. So Aramis could very much come in as she becomes a young woman and an adult, and come in and take it and run with it and change it to something completely different. Because I think it needs to as we evolve. We're only able to work with what we can with the resources we have at the time. And then we have to be open to changing it as we go. And so this is just the beginning. But I believe the world at whole and at wide is shifting in so dramatically, but aligning us with a higher resonance, a higher version of ourselves, which is quite beautiful. And it's infinite. You know, the possibilities are infinite.
And I think that's the most beautiful vision that people can hear, because I look at the new schools going up around here, and there's a brand new school being built in elementary. We're the last one in our town of about 5 rebuilt schools. And it's still the square. It's still the square building, but it's a gigantic one. It's so big now. It's an elementary school, and I wish they had curved it a little.
They look so much like prisons.
That's it. That's it. I know. And if they could just open their minds, I guess it was a little too soon for them. But, you know, I feel like they're going to shift again, and pretty quickly, as you're saying, because it's so important to embrace this. Like, I just think it's so beautiful. It does bring tears to my eyes to hear you bring all this through, because I was thrilled when I found Montessori for my kids, but I didn't follow all the way through it. And then, of course, they went into college and different things. And I can see some of the programming so easily now. You know, it's like I didn't think it would happen, and yet it did. It does, you know.
But you know what? It was part of their journey. That's something that they chose to be in that system. Everybody chose to be here at exact time for an exact reason. So there are no mistakes, there are no regrets. It's just that's their journey, and where they go is part of their soul's evolution. And so everybody came in and chose to be born at an exact period for a reason.
Yeah, and I do understand that now, but it took a while to see it, because we've been growing and evolving so quickly that I didn't realize, wow, what a box that they put them in with this thinking and that thinking. It's pretty amazing. So that you're breaking all those parameters, you're breaking through all that, and the star children that are coming through are helping us see all that. And it's just so beautiful. It's just, my heart just sings with all this information that you're bringing through, because it's everything we need to create this new earth that we've been waiting for. And I think it starts with the children. It starts with education. It starts with, you know, the parents opening to, as you say, unlimited possibilities. It's just beautiful. So you said so much. I know you have a free offer to the people. You have a special offer for everyone here listening. Would you like to tell us about it?
Well, I have a free download for my book. So they'll get a free copy of the Intuitive Transformation Evolution book, which I think is a really great, easy read right now for people that are newly embarking on their journey, newly awakened and kind of confused on what to do. And it really truly is a simple way of explaining how we are emotional beings, and how that drives our wellness, and how we are more in control than we think we are. And it's all about the way we think and how we process, and we can take control of our lives if we just understand these certain fundamentals. So I think it's such a great way for people to either start, or if they are kind of open to different people's versions of an awakening, then it can be complementary at any point in your journey. So I think that it's a good read right now.
Yes, thank you so much. And it's a great gift for people. And I hope you all take advantage of it, because if you're a new parent or want to become a parent, or if you're a grandparent like I am at this point, it's so wonderful to have these new ways of looking at things. And I brought some of your little videos to my grandchildren, but they're still young, so they're getting there. They're getting there.
Yeah.
And how young do you find the kids are really catching on? Does it matter on age, or what are you seeing?
No, I mean, as soon as they can talk, some of them will talk my ear off, and so even before, I mean, if I had those books back when my children were younger, the ones that I've written, I would read that to them at 6 months old, because
Yeah,
even
yeah.
if they don't intellectually understand it at the time, it's seeping into the subconscious. And so um I've told people, hey, play the divinely guided children cartoons in the background while they're playing. They don't even have to watch it,
Mm,
because they're multidimensional. They're listening all at the same time while they're doing other things, and they're receptive to it. So there really is it's not too early ever to start any of this stuff.
Well, that's a good idea. I never thought of that, playing them behind in the scenes, because there's always something they want to watch. It's usually, a Disney movie, because that's what they've been so used to, which, it has its good and bad. But
Yeah.
it's a start, it's something. But any
Yeah.
other tips you have for parents for getting the kids started on this, to be open to them, and to allow an open path for their children?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a two-way street. I think the most important thing is being receptive, because a lot of parents are taken back by these newer children and the things that come out of their mouth,
Mhm.
and their personality and their characteristics are just kind of, whoa, where did it come from? So I
Mhm.
think these children just need to feel like they're supported and safe, and they can be themselves so that they don't shut down. So maybe if I was a child that felt more comfortable, maybe I would have told my mom about the witches. And maybe that could have led to something, like, what does that mean? Why am I afraid? So, believe them with the
Yeah.
stuff that they don't discount it and say, oh, you're imagining these things. So that's the one-way street. But also for for the parents, creating that open door too, where you plant the seeds and you mention things. And even if you think they're too young, you read books about energy
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
crystals and all of these things. It's about exposure. Are they going to get it? Not likely consciously right away, but it's seeping in where it needs to. And it's all about the energy we surround them with. And so it's never too early to kind of plant those seeds and expose them to, things. I've been talking about tarot cards and crystals and energy since my kids, before they could talk. So by now they're just
Really?
like, oh, it's just mom talking. It's normal language. But in some houses, it's very taboo.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, sometimes my children have a friend that come over, and they have things, and the kids are like, what's that? And, maybe their parents aren't open to it. We don't judge, but the point is, just exposing them to it. Even
Mm.
if you're not comfortable with it, start with something really simple that you are comfortable with. Crystals, things like that, energy, and then mindfulness. I think children need to be taught at a young age how to be mindful of their thoughts and how to release it, because most behavioral issues that children have right now, hands down, especially new birth children, is that they're so advanced, but they're trapped in a child mindset with the intellectual capacity that's limited. So they don't have the words to express how they're feeling, and they don't have an outlet for their frustration. So they get really mad, and they're going to say, I hate you, mom. They don't
Mhm.
mean that they hate you, but in that moment, that's the best way that they could express their frustration, with the little words that they have, but they don't mean that. So we have to guide them on ways to let it out and say, it's okay that you're frustrated. You don't have to have the words to describe it. And we give them an outlet to release it, so that they don't hold it all in. And then next thing you know, they're punching some kid at school, or they're slapping their
Yes.
sister in the face, and then they get in trouble. And it just creates this vicious cycle of being misunderstood and not feeling
Mm.
safe. So we got to start with the young ones and teach them that it's okay to have emotions. Big emotions are okay, but we teach them how to release them, and healthy ways to release them. And that mom and dad, I think the most humble thing that a mom and dad or grandparent can do with a child is express that they aren't perfect and that they make mistakes. I think they love to see not love, but I think it helps when children say, "Oh, mom said, oh, mommy was wrong. Oh, like I make mistakes too," because it really takes that pressure off of them. So it's just creating that two-way street where you're receptive and open, but also being a good role model, representative, and supporter for them as well.
Yeah. Oh, that's fabulous stuff. I know. Well, I'm so happy for the new parents coming in and everyone right now who's aware of you and what you're bringing through, because you're just doing an amazing job. It's just everything you're doing is just, you're shifting the whole paradigm. You have your own paradigm shift going on with what you're doing. So you're creating that. So we thank you so much for that, Sherri. And I just want to thank the listeners real quickly that are here. Please, we love your comments. We love any kind of aha moment you might have had. And if you want to connect with Sherri, all her info will be at the bottom of this after this interview comes out. And we just love that, all the things that you're bringing through, Sherri. You're stepping into the role of becoming what I'm calling is a mastermind, expanding alchemist, and creatrix. And I looked up the word because the word just came through. I sort of get that with people sometimes. And you're trusting your guidance and intuition to support you in the highest ways. So I looked up what a creatrix was. And a creatrix is a woman who is deeply connected to herself as a woman in the feminine source of creative power. She gives rise to desires and gives birth to ideas in life of all kinds. She dreams courageously and trusts so deeply in the intrinsic co-creation connection she shares with the divine and the natural world. I think that says all there is about you right now.
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't even know that was a word. So that I'm going to write that down and look it up more later. That's crazy. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
That is such a perfect description of everything you're doing and who you are. It's just beautiful. So good. I'm glad I brought that through for you. So yeah, it was so you. I mean, I get those downloads myself every now and then, and I always get it for whoever my speakers are. I'm like, okay, who is she? So then boom, that's what came through. So you are expanding our education systems through the exploration of nature and your unlimited creative processes that open the children and adults' minds to so much more that we can do and as we are ready for. So that is, so beautiful, everything you're doing. And the divine human is rising, and we hold unlimited potential, as you just shared, and create our new earth realities. Thank you again, Sherri, for sharing your courage and in owning your divine light, which is my phrase that I've used over the years. And as we raise our heart's frequency, know that we are nourished by the love of the universe. And I am Yarra Atlantica Miller, also known as Janet Miller, and I will see you all in the next episode. Thank you again, Sherri.
Thank you so much for having me.